Hi, and welcome to Newsmakers for inside analysis and behind-the-scenes commentary from Santa Barbara's top journalists and local political leaders about the most important news events in our community. I'm your host, Jerry Roberts. Tonight, our special post-election show looks behind the headlines from the June 5th primary. With a big assist from Mayor Kathy Murillo, West Side voters elect one of their own to council. The status quo wins big at the county as two insurgent challenges fall short. A look behind the winners and losers of Election Day. And what's the future for Republicans in California as their numbers plummet? Our panel tonight, Tyler Hayden, news editor of The Independent. Indy executive editor Nick Welsh. Kathryn Barnes, producer for KCRW. And Santa Barbara conservative leader Dale Francisco. Thank you all for coming. So Tyler, what looked like was going to be a squeaker for City Council in District 3 turned out not to be that close after all. How was Oscar Gutierrez able to win more than half the votes in a four-person contest?
I think it was a combination of things. First, I think Michael Vidal, as hard as he worked, as many doors as he knocked on, he raised quite a bit of money, almost as much as Oscar. I think he remained kind of a question mark for a lot of people. I don't think people could quite figure him out as a person, as a candidate. My first interaction with him was even a little confusing. I'd been emailing with him to set up our first interview, and the first thing he says when he meets me is, "I thought you'd be shorter." And I just didn't know what to make of that. I was like, is that supposed to be funny? Is that like a...
Well, he said he was 6'6".
Okay, so
There's
that's
no
another
way
thing.
he's 6'6".
Okay, right. So why are we even talking about his height? But that's confusing too. So
How tall are you?
I'm 6'2".
Oh, okay.
He said he was 6'7". I think when I stood next to him, I didn't feel 5-inch difference. But anyway.
So that was the key
that's
to the
super,
whole thing.
That's it. That's my analysis. So that's the superficial.
Not tall enough.
Yeah, that's the surface stuff. But beyond that, he never voted in a city election. He really had never been involved in city politics. Nobody had ever heard his name. He's a successful guy. He's been in the sort of wealth management sector for a while. But I never got the feeling that his neighbors knew him like they knew Oscar. And he never quite sort of got the traction that you need in a city race, and especially in a district election where you're really only you're trying to rack up a few hundred votes. He just never made that connection. Oscar also had a really compelling personal narrative. I mean, he grew up here. He was raised here. Michael grew up in Fresno. Struggled in high school. Got involved with videography and really kind of got into that. Eventually went to
director of Newsmakers. That probably was worth.
That was huge. Huge. That's a big one. And he made it, and he's a Santa Barbara guy.
And the mayor.
And the mayor, that was a big one. She donated $5,000 to a campaign. That's no small amount. She was with him every step of the way. Some people would say holding his hand sometimes.
Some people would.
Yeah, would speak.
And did.
Yeah, right. Might be sitting with one, and would even speak for him at events sometimes during endorsement meetings. But so she was a big booster of his. He still, I thought, did well during the debates. Kind of came into his own throughout the campaign. Was really impressive with us when we would talk to him and during interviews. So he didn't win it because of her, I don't think, but it was certainly a factor.
You talked to Oscar at the beginning.
I spoke with both Oscar and Michael Vidal.
And what did you end up doing? Did you endorse Michael?
I gave each of them the best advice I could. And I told them pretty much the same thing. They were both asking questions about how do you run a campaign and what's it like being on city council, those kinds of questions. So I said the same thing to both of them. Now, at near the very end of the campaign, Michael asked if I would endorse him, and I said yes. And the reason I said yes, and let me be very clear here, I like Oscar, he's a good guy. The thing that Michael brought that I think was unique, and he was the only candidate with a solid finance background. And if you don't have that background, you're going to spend at least the first 2 years on council getting it. And I think that's the most important thing council does.
Yeah. You endorsed Oscar.
Yeah.
You met with both of them. Why'd you go with Oscar?
Oh, because we're stooges of the mayor.
That's what
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party.
Kathy Maria called up and said, "Hey, Nick, I know you didn't endorse me, but we endorsed Oscar." And I said, "Oh, why didn't you put it like that?" No, Oscar came in and
Kathy Maria, a former employee of the Santa Barbara Independent.
Oscar came in and he was just very winning in the endorsement interview. He was very persuasive. He felt like he was grounded in the community, whereas Michael, he seemed like the guy you might want to sit next to at a dinner party, but you weren't quite sure if you wanted to put him on the city council bench.
Would you like to sit next to Oscar at a dinner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would like to sit?
I sit next to anybody at a dinner party. Michael, again, he was sort of a question mark, and it was there was this really fast intelligence, but where have you been? And he has been involved in some aspects of the community, but the fact that he didn't even vote in the presidential race,
Or the mayoral.
or any of the mayoral races, that's just like, okay, that's a little, it's not a fatal flaw, but it does make you wonder.
Yeah. One of the things you do at KCRW is you do local news to go with the Los Angeles-based stuff. But how do you decide where the focus is? I assume that District 3 was a little too local.
We covered it a little bit. I mean, our listener base is Ventura and Santa Barbara, so sometimes we don't want to get too hyper local in the city, just so that people in Oxnard can still relate to the news we're covering. So we were definitely following it, and but more in the way of who's getting endorsed by who's leading the race. Not so much the nitty gritty of interviewing each person, getting each person into the studio.
Yeah. So what do we think? On a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being absolutely in Kathy's pocket and 0 being in Jason's pocket, where's Oscar going to land?
I think Oscar is a solid 2.
Oh.
2.5. I think he might surprise us in his individuality. I don't know, maybe he just was convincing, but when we spoke to him during the endorsement interview and he talked about sort of his tendency to not just run with the crowd and to not just do what he's told, and he gave examples of that over his life, and I believe it. It'll be that. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to practice it. And when he's up there and he's got to be making decisions and he's got to be processing all this information, a lot of it financial.
She's twisting his arm.
Yeah, and he's getting pressure from all angles, and that that'll be sort of the telling moment. But for now, I think he's convinced himself that he's going to run his own course.
All right, real quick, 0 to 5.
I put
5
it
being
at 3.
Pinocchio.
I put it should be 3. I think in a lot of ways, I don't know if it should be hip pocket. I think they have a natural affinity. I think a lot of renters' rights issues, which are going to be coming up shortly after this election. I think he's already there. They're sort of moving in the same direction. I think there may be some interesting differences in terms of housing density and ADU type stuff. I think he's going to be more his own person than the caricature stereotype has it.
All right. What kind
Agreed.
of pressure is he going to face?
Well, I agree with Tyler. I mean, based on my conversation with him, Oscar had his own ideas. And certainly the endorsement of the Democratic Party and the support of Kathy Maria made a significant difference for him. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But I think he's sincere. And what he told me was he knows what he wants to do, and he's not going to be led around by anyone else.
You want to weigh in on this, 0 to 5?
Well, I think just looking at the whole council together collectively, I mean, it just shows that the district elections are kind of doing what they were intended to do, which was to bring more minorities into leadership roles here and really have people born and bred in the West Side, represent the West Side. And now we're starting to see that.
3 Latinos on the on their
But whether or not they can make some really tough decisions on housing and transportation, and we'll see.
All right. The correct answer is 2.5. Tyler's right. All right. All right. So the Independent batted 1,000. Is that true with its endorsements? But the one I have to say that surprised me was Betsy Schaefer, easily winning the auditor controller race. despite the attacks and allegations of corruption by Jen Christensen. What happened there?
Yeah, I spoke with
And
her.
the $2 million embezzlement, which you said last week was couch change.
I think what I said is if you factor $2 million embezzled over a 9-year period by 9 different people, that was not enough to buy enough opioids to get constipated. I think that was
So
what
you
I
had
did.
rehearsed that line, is that?
I did the math on the spot.
And the opioids.
I will say,
You're right, by the way. It's only about $250.
You just do that by hand?
Wow, good work. Long division.
Arithmetic.
Not bad.
and I don't know if she was the ringleader, but she was the first one to be sentenced. Lynn Hogan just was sentenced to 9 years. So we have the number 9 for those who are numerologically predisposed.
So nobody
period.
cared about Jen Christensen's
No,
allegations.
you know what? By the time you got through reciting it last time, I think 90% of your viewers had fallen asleep. It's a complicated.
So that
sort of-
90% of $2 million.
It's a very complicated sort of nuanced shade of conflict of interest, and I think the problem is that Jen Christensen was so focused on bringing that message that she forgot to identify and define herself. And so nobody really got a sense of who Jen Christensen was other than she was out there banging the hammer on Betsy Schaefer, who nobody ever heard of running for a position that nobody who even covered it still knows what they did. I talked to Betsy's campaign manager on the day of the election, Mary Rose, and she goes, I can't believe at this stage of my life that I'm talking about the auditor-controller's race. And I can't believe even more that
Hey, I'm
that's
writing
not-
about the school board. shit.
that-
We're all working our way down the career ladder.
that is a hot race of Santa Barbara County. And it turns out it wasn't. And I think probably in that particular one, the Democratic Party, the big D, did make a difference. I think, and Jen isn't really so much a Republican, not that that would have helped her that much, but she's sort of in that in-between zone. And I think when you're in that in-between zone, it doesn't really, you don't fly.
Yeah, well, she was declined to stay. She used to be a Republican, though.
She used to be a Republican.
Were you?
That's right.
Did you think she was stronger than that? Than she ended up?
I thought I thought she would have done better, partly because she had the name recognition based on the supervisor's race 2 years ago.
Running against us.
Yeah, so I thought she would have done better, and I think it's hard for candidates to really know how they appear to the public. And I have to agree with Nick, if most of your appearance is combative and it's about an issue that most people don't know about, that's probably not going to work well. If it's an issue that people really care about and are concerned about, that can work very well.
Yeah. The other county big race was the sheriff, and 2 challengers just got what Bill Brown ended up with like 56.
54%.
Yeah.
I think.
What was your take on that?
I was a little surprised. I thought someone would go on to November to run against him. But I think kind of the same thing happened in a way. Like the 2 lieutenants, they didn't do a great job of really saying who they were, and their platforms were all issues that I don't think like the common Santa Barbara resident resonates with. Like a lot of it was so interdepartmental. It was all about overstaffing in the understaffing in the jails, mandatory overtime, low morale. Those are important things, but to you and me, that's just going on in the department. We might not care about that.
Yeah.
And they kind of didn't talk as much as maybe they should have about really things that resonate with us. So mandatory evacuations, immigration. They talked a little bit about it, but that wasn't really the forefront of.
You know, I thought Eddie Sway talked about mental health and the need for the law enforcement to address that, but that wasn't something that ever surfaced. It really didn't get out there.
Well, you know, it didn't, but then towards the end, you know, it is interesting. Eddie Sway, for those who don't know him, he's a 32-year lieutenant, or he's with the department 32 years, and he sort of cobbled together a program to get deputies and non-sworn officers trained in conflict intervention strategies so that, you don't wind up getting into fights or shooting people who are mentally ill and can't really even comply with the orders. And he made that a big deal. And I think Brian Olmsted, who was the other challenger in the race, a 30-year veteran, he sort of picked up some of that towards the end. Bill Brown, the timing was coincidental, but it looked strategic. At a Board of Supervisors meeting, shows up with, I have in my hands a blueprint for the future for mental health.
He had not done that previously.
And he hadn't done that previously. He served at Jerry Brown, the governor's behest on the statewide mental health commission, and shows up at the Board of Supervisors in the height of election season with the blueprint that he was talking about. So the issue, I think what did come out of the race from the mental health point of view is that the personnel, they had a 6-hour budget. They have 6 hours a week budgeted for this position. Now they have 30 hours. So,
Something.
a 500% increase for people who do math.
Well, thank you, Eddie. Let me check that.
Well, and he brought up the whole bringing dogs in to help
Right.
inmates,
Oh, yeah.
and
Oh,
that
the
was
press
like
release
2
with the
days
kitten.
before the election
Oh, yeah.
or something.
It was dog training and cat socialization. Who is going to socialize a cat? And that is-
No, but that was only for the
socializing with
female
the
inmates.
yeah.
Only the female inmates got the
Yeah.
cats. The male inmates got the dogs.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And the county, this is for the new county jail that won't be opening up till way late next year.
All right, Kathryn, so the big story in California that was being watched in Washington was whether Democrats were going to have any success in going after these 7 House seats that are held by Republicans, but where Hillary Clinton beat Trump in 2016. One of them is in our area in Ventura. The 25th was Steve Knight, and I know you were watching that. And then on the other side, Republicans are maybe going to go after Salud Carbajal because they need a couple. What was going on in the House?
Yeah, so like nationwide, there's this whole blue wave, idea that we need to, if Democrats want to flip the House, then they'll have to get 23 seats. And 7 of those potential seats are in California. Actually, I think 10 are competitive, where a Democrat could win over a Republican. 7 of those did vote for Hillary in 2016, so they're thinking those are even potentially more likely. And the good thing is they were worried during the primaries that there were too many Democratic candidates for each of these 7 districts, and that they would split the vote, and maybe 2 Republicans.
Because of the top 2 primaries.
Yeah, so maybe 2 Republicans would go forward in November. That was a worry, but all of those districts now have a Democrat and a Republican
And
going
what
forward
does the
to November.
25th look like?
So the 25th, there's a Republican, Steve Knight. I think he's been the congressman for a while now. I don't know how long, but a long time.
Number of terms.
Yeah, well liked, I think, in the district, but I guess the district is turning a little bit more blue. They were one of the ones who voted for Hillary in 2016, and the Democratic contender going into November, her name is Katie Hill. She's, I think, 30. She's new to politics.
She was the left liberal Democrat.
So Steve Knight got, I think, about 52%. She got 20%. So, not that much, but there were 3 other Democrats racing.
So the Democratic vote was like 48. Which
Yeah, if you
they're
added
at the
them
bottom.
all up, they still wouldn't get to him. But
it's a primary.
yeah, but I think even though the Democrats see this as a victory, that each of these races are going to have a Democratic contender, it's still an uphill battle for a lot of these districts.
And does Justin Freed have any realistic chance of knocking off Salud if the Republicans get behind him with a whole bunch of money?
I think they might. I mean, they did last time he ran. There was money going into that campaign. And so that's kind of the opposite, that they think maybe they could flip this blue district red with Justin Freed. I don't know.
think-
Do you think Justin can do that? Or?
That's a race that I feel for Justin, because I like Justin a lot, and any Republican running in a district like this in the first term of the Trump presidency is really fighting an uphill battle.
Because you got to
Because
decide.
Well, obviously, part of Salud's strategy, I assume, will be to tag Justin with Trump, which is what happened last time around. And I don't think that's really an accurate characterization of Justin for Reed, but that will happen. And the antipathy towards Trump in this district is just extreme. So I just, like I said, I think it's very much an uphill battle. However, I do think it's interesting. One of the highlights for me on election night was John Cox, who I respect, winning that second position
And for governor.
and that was part of Kevin McCarthy's strategy, whatever you may think of Kevin McCarthy.
House Majority Leader from Bakersfield.
Exactly, and he felt that unless we had a Republican in the gubernatorial race, that the turnout in those districts that Kathy's talking about wouldn't be enough.
Yeah.
So,
Were you surprised by how poorly Michael Aaron Woody did?
I thought he was a big winner. Come on, he got 11%. Whoever heard of Michael Aaron Woody? He got 11%. I think, I think your point about Cox is a good one, and you couple that with the repeal of the gas tax that's going to be on the ballot in November, particularly in Orange County, where a number of those flippable
Three of
seats are. Three of them are, which is such a volatile place right now. I think that's going to make it that much harder for Democrats to flip those.
That's a 12-cent gas tax
Yeah.
that the Democrats basically passed 2 years ago.
2 years ago, and so
for infrastructure.
and Cox is making that a very big deal.
Yeah, and sanctuary state
Yeah.
as well, where a lot of local jurisdictions.
And certainly in Orange County, you see a big reaction to that, against that.
Anyway, Justin could beat Salud.
I don't know. I was just thinking. I haven't so far seen him do anything different, for better or for worse, this round than he has the last.
You don't find him
Two.
more jolly?
Okay, I guess you could argue that he's a little more upbeat.
Plus, he invited you to his victory party, didn't
Yeah,
he?
that was so nice. Yeah.
Well, summer hasn't hit. The rodeo season,
Right,
the
okay,
fairs,
right.
got to hit all
Yep.
those spots.
A lot of cotton candy and smiles and I don't know. I guess if he gets a lot of money and there's a big enough turnout, then it's possible. I
just don't know what his message is. Really.
Right. I guess that's it.
I'm not Salud. I
right.
mean, it's what we were talking
I'm
about.
not
It's the
Salud.
same talking points the last couple of years,
Yeah.
He doesn't, and I think it is true. It's like right now, either you're with Trump or against Trump, and both positions are untenable for him. And anything else will seem like prevarication. And he just doesn't feel like he's got his mojo going this time around as much as he did last time. And unless Salud really comes and steps on it in some heinous way, I think he's going to be painted in as a Trump surrogate, whether he likes it or not.
Yeah. So the Republican Party, Dale, just before the election, the 10-day report by the Secretary of State is now only the third largest voting bloc behind decline to stay.
yes, indeed.
Steve Poizner, who used to be a Republican, ran for, actually, other than Arnold Schwarzenegger, the last guy elected to a statewide office who ran as a Republican. He was the insurance commissioner. Ran again for insurance commissioner. He finished first, but he's running as an independent now. Is that what Republicans have to do in the long term? I mean, is the brand so tarnished?
From my point of view, I see the Republican Party as a very split organization, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Republican Party, as constituted, disappeared in the next couple of decades. I think you have such an enormous gulf between what I would call the Republican establishment, the Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Bush family, et cetera, John McCain, whatever.
John Cox.
I think John Cox, just to divert real quickly there, John Cox was seen as more of a centrist Republican. That's why McCarthy advised Trump to endorse him, because Travis Allen probably didn't stand any chance outside of Orange County. And I think there's truth in that, but I see Cox as someone who actually he is an independent thinker with his own ideas. So that I would say, yes, he's more centrist, but no, he's not establishment, from my point of view. But anyway, that establishment piece of the Republican Party is increasingly unpopular with the base of the Republican Party. And so that other side...
The Trump
Well, the
base?
Trump base, the people who are not members of the ruling class and don't want to be, the constitutionalist Tea Party, that whole conglomeration of people, which includes a lot of working class Democrats and working class independents, is a new constellation in American politics and may need its own party.
Interesting. As a member of the ruling class and a millennial, Kathryn, do you know, Gavin Newsom ran a bunch of ads, $2 million worth of ads, attacking Cox as being too close to Trump in an attempt to increase the vote for Cox, and he got some criticism from the Democrats. Do you think that Cox being on the ticket and basically setting up this Trump versus anti-Trump thing helps in those seats or hurts in those seats in terms of the turnout, those House seats we were talking about?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be hard because in 2016, you know, it was a presidential election. I don't know if people are going to turn out. I mean, a governor's race is very important, but maybe they won't turn out in the same way that they did in 2016 on I guess both sides. You know, more people voted for Hillary in those districts, but that's not to say that they will come out in 2018.
Yeah, and historically, midterms you get more intensive Republican votes because they vote as a hobby. So
Responsibility.
yeah, so whatever. All right, so that's we're out of time. Thanks to tonight's panel, Tyler Hayden, Nick Welsh, Kathryn Barnes, and Dale Francisco. Thank you all for watching. Please visit our website, newsmakerswithjr.com, to check out my blog posts on politics and media in Santa Barbara and beyond, and our YouTube channel, where you'll find an archive of our past shows and special interviews. Thanks again to our director, JP Montalvo, to our crew, Kathryn, Suzanne, Ryan, Kyle, and Lauren. And as always, our top-ranking, high-powered, high-energy senior executive producer, Hap Freund. This is the last show of our winter-spring season, and we will be back with you after Labor Day. So thanks again for watching. See us in summer reruns, and we'll see you after vacation. Good night.